My name's Jodie Copley. I'm a Senior Lecturer and the Clinical Education Program Director for Occupational Therapy at the University of Queensland. Our university has a number of occupational therapy clinics that we run that have been in existence for a number of years now. Many universities have looked at developing clinics as a way of supplementing student placements and student training, and for me that gives me the opportunity to also be a clinical educator, for that to be one of my roles. So I have students on placement with me, and what I do is usually do a shared placement model with another agency, so students are with me half the time and with the other agency half the time. And we communicate regularly about the students and we evaluate them together and so forth. So it's important, in my experience, to think about the student being organised and feeling organised from early on in the placement, but to also check in with that as time progresses across the placement. I think it's very easy as a practice educator to assume sometimes that students know how to organise themselves, and certainly, just like anybody else, some students will be good at that and have natural strengths in organisation and time management and self-management, and others might sort of need a little bit more scaffolding and support. Clearly, the experience they get at university before placement is designed to help them with those self-management skills, but I think there's still quite a range. So I find it really useful to be very open with the student about that and to make it very clear and explicit that time management and organisation is a skill that they're learning, just like all of the clinical OT skills that they're learning. So really getting that out on the table and helping them to know that I would expect they might need help with that. As the placement progresses, often I will try to get them to show me physically what they're using to organise themselves. So I ask questions early on about, what do you use in terms of timetables and diaries and lists? What do you find works for you? What have you done with the timetable that I showed you the other day? How are you keeping track of that? And usually I actually say, show me how you're doing it, so that there's a physical artifact that they're using that I'm aware, because sometimes I think you can talk about those things, and students, particularly those who are good communicators, can maybe give you the sense that they're on top of things because they nod and they smile and they give lots of positive non-verbals, and it's not really until you get down to the details of what they're using in terms of tools, organisational tools, that you really think, okay, yep, I see now, and you can shape that a little bit more. I think that a student's individual learning style and approach to their work is useful to know and to notice from early on as well. Some of the things that I find will be a challenge for students in terms of their own organisation and time management might be if they tend to be a little bit perfectionistic. So they're coming from a background often where they've been involved in university studies and doing assignments, and they sometimes will get into that mentality that you just go and you do it and do the task, and you know, until you feel it's good enough. And of course, in the clinical workplace, there's deadlines, there's timelines, there's things that have to be done, there's a schedule that has to be kept, there's a caseload that needs to be managed. So that's something to be aware of, to sort of be very, once again, explicit with the students, to say, when you get it to a point that you want to talk to me about it, let's discuss it then. Don't wait until you think it's perfect before we discuss it, because that's not the real world workplace. So that's one thing. The other thing that sometimes comes up is if some students have been used to starting a task, taking it through to completion before starting another task. For those students, sometimes it's a challenge to swap between different tasks, as we usually do on a work day. You know, you allocate time to certain tasks or activities, and then you might need to leave that, go on to something else. You're reprioritising constantly. So I think inviting the student to talk to you about what tasks they have at different points, what should I prioritise now, what would you recommend I bring to the top of the list, and inviting them to do that really helps to teach them early on some of those skills, and to be able to let something go in their head for a little bit and then know that they can come back to it later. I think as educators, we forget that we do that reasonably seamlessly, and we're not wedded to staying with something through to completion. So really just looking at how they're spending, in their diary, they may have allocated time for particular tasks, but once you talk about it a little bit more and dig a little bit further, it transpires that, oh, I had that time allocated for that task, but then I really felt that I needed to do this, or I got distracted talking to so-and-so about something else. And while it's often useful to have flexibility, sometimes it's that just really sort of stating out loud, are you sticking to the task that you've allocated? Are you allocating in your diary time for non-client related tasks? Because those are just as important as the client related tasks. And having that allocated gives it that importance and prioritises it so that you're ready for your client contact. So talking those kinds of things through and actually getting down to the nitty-gritty of how they're using those half-hour slots or hour slots will sometimes be a really useful process.